Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Yo, what's up? This is Luis Aguasvivas. I'm a video game critic for Pop Matters and NPR. I'm also a member of the New York Video Games Critics Circle, and I'm joining today the Fun and Games podcast to talk about a very important game. And even more importantly than that is a game that is one of my absolute favorites, and that is Dragon Quest III. Yeah, so where to begin? Where to begin with Dragon Quest III? It's definitely one of those games where you think you know its impact on the industry and just like in games in general, but you find out something new and you realize, oh wow, this is as important of a game as Doom, as Space Wars, as Super Mario World, as Pac-Man. It's definitely one of those games where, especially for us in the West, in the United States, we got it fairly late as a repackaging by Nintendo of America in their big push to try to sell video RPG games to us. And it had mixed success. The first Dragon Quest game was famously packaged with a Nintendo Power subscription. That's how a lot of people got to play that here in North America. And because of that, it actually moved a lot of units, less so for Dragon Quest II and Dragon Quest III in America. But in Japan, Dragon Quest III was arguably the biggest game since Space Invaders. And famously, if listeners can remember or know of the history, is that Space Invaders actually caused a shortage of the amount of actual mint coins in the Japanese economy because so many people were rushing to play Space Invaders. It wasn't that extreme for Dragon Quest, but you have a lot of urban legends regarding Dragon Quest III. Japanese government made it illegal for Enix, which was the publisher at the time, for releasing Dragon Quest games on weekdays. This is not necessarily true. I mean, it did lead to like a big frenzy regarding students like skipping school, but Enix voluntarily, subsequent to the release of Dragon Quest III, they released all the Dragon Quest games on weekends, just to not get like bad publicity. It sold a lot of units. I think on the first day, I've read reports that it sold over 1 million units in its first day, and this is 1988. That's huge numbers from even by today's standards. And just within a few weeks, it sold over 3 million units. This was surprising, but also not so much in hindsight when you realize what was Yuji Horii, the creator of Dragon Quest, and Enix and a lot of the team behind their general strategy, which was Dragon Quest as a series. Specifically, the first 3 games were meant to be introductions to the Japanese general audience when it comes to RPGs, specifically computer RPGs, in the vein of Dungeons and Dragons. These were very esoteric and complicated games for the time, very difficult. Dragon Quest famously stripped that and provided a very simple entry point for players into RPGs, specifically in Japan. It was a success. It was it was a slow going, but eventually you've had through a partnership with Show and Jump, which Yuji Horii used to write for, and who can forget the great work of Akira Toriyama. The series was successful. Then Dragon Quest II came out, and that one introduced the idea of the party to players. Because Dragon Quest I, you just had one single character that you controlled, and you had to worry about managing their leveling system and buying equipment for, and you would only battle just one enemy at a time. Dragon Quest II multiplied this complexity by adding multiple party members, 3 in total, and just more enemies for the player to engage with. And it was also arguably one of the most notoriously difficult and unfair games, especially later in the game. The penultimate dungeon and the ultimate dungeon, you just enemies just have game-ending spells that they cast really liberally. It's still a good game. It gets maligned unfairly, but it's it, it's definitely still like growing pains. Dragon Quest 3 though, that's arguably the progenitor to what we know now as like the JRPG. It's a big sprawling game, takes about 30 to 40 hours to complete. You have multiple party members, which, with the exception of one, which is the main character, the hero, you actually create, you roll them, right? And the same, similar to Dungeons and Dragons, similar to Ultima, to Wizardry. You go to an inn, you hire these characters, you pick like their class, and you kind of rearrange like their stats a bit. It's That's definitely a level up from complexity from what we're used to seeing from a game. Yeah, the story by today's standards in Dragon Quest 3 is definitely very bare bones, but I think that's one of its appeals, especially now where stories can just become so unwieldy, so many like plot points to remember. um, all that you have to worry about is, you're a hero, you're trying to follow the footsteps of your father who goes on a failed mission to stop the evil Baramos, and you follow in your father's footsteps, literally. You go to a lot of the same places that he went. People remember your father. Some even mistake you for him at certain times, or tell you that that you remind them of him. It's definitely a slow burn by today's standards, but that's a good thing. That's a really good thing because you know games now, not only are they really fast, just everything about our lives is like very fast. Dragon Quest really gives you time to just hang out, chill with the world. Really great dialogue. Even though there's most NPCs don't have that many lines of dialogue, it's pretty funny. Dragon Quest is, especially the localizations, like known for like its puns, and that's part of the great pleasure of playing a Dragon Quest game. It's just seeing either what the monsters are called, great art by Akira Toriyama, or how different characters in different towns in different cities speak. So a lot of different dialects, a lot of different accents used. Definitely piles on the charm. I'm not going to get too much into spoilers, but the story definitely takes twists and turns, and some things that might be unexpected to new players, especially the ending of the game. It really ties in the overall trilogy of the first two games really nicely. Dragon Quest 3 is definitely one of those games where it's gameplay and systems first. Um, the world is really endearing, really charming. You really get a lot of motivation to see your journey through as you're playing, and your ability to have customizable party members. I mean, it's the first game to introduce classes, and not just classes in the sense that you pick classes. Later on, about a third of the game through, you're able to actually change the classes of your party members, and it creates for a lot of different variability. It creates situations where players can able to build specific characters with different skills from across different classes. It's a lot of fun to experiment, and it definitely creates situations where you can have overpowered characters, especially since one of the worst classes, the goof off, can become a sage. With a class change, it's the only one that's able to do that without an item, which is really funny. F- I highly recommend that people who aren't too familiar with the game check out Donkey's video of the Dragon Quest 3 remake that he did recently, where he had a party like full of goof offs, and you just see the shenanigans, like just completely chaotic like class. They don't do anything that you want them to do, and definitely makes the adventure a lot more difficult. So if you want the sicko mode, hard mode, that's what you should try that. But it can be a little frustrating. Now, when it comes to my overall experience with Dragon Quest III, I've played it for the first time on the Game Boy Color. When that remake, there was just a really good. I would argue it's still probably the one of the best ways to play. There's been a lot of remakes for the series. I mean, it was released first on the Famicom. Here's the Nintendo Entertainment System, then the Super Nintendo port, and then you have a Game Boy Color remake, and you've had the more recent um, remakes that were released on mobile, which are excellent. And now you have the new HD 2D remake. I mean, horrible, horrible name, but it's to be expected. It's from the same folks that um, that worked on Octopath Travel and Triangle Strategy. Also, horrible names. Great games, horrible names. So you get a new like polish, a new look to the games. It's endearing and it looks pretty good. I was actually kind of skeptical of it at first, but I think they don't do anything too different in regards to changing like the character designs from Akira Toriyama, which is critical to the success of Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest 3 also has a fantastic score, which I forgot to mention, by Koichi Sugiyama, who like Toriyama actually passed away. So there's only one member of the original 3 or 4, depending on how you wanna count, creators of like the series. So it's really interesting to see where the series is gonna go forward from that. But outside of my tangent, so I played it on the Game Boy Color and had a really great time with it. It's one of the first RPGs that I ended up finishing. Actually, like captivated me in a way that no others had before. I mean, I played Pokemon before, and that was fine, but I felt it was too simplistic. And surely enough, obviously, Pokemon wouldn't exist without the influence of Dragon Quest. I finished that and then became just completely like obsessed with the series. And it's one of the few games that, if video games were completely to disappear, it wouldn't affect me too much. Besides the fact of Dragon Quest being gone and Tetris or Pac-Man, but it's definitely a great game. The HD 2D remake is actually a great implementation of the game, and I wouldn't say it's the best entry to the series. If folks want to get into the series, I think Dragon Quest 11 is the best way into it. And actually, there's like a tie-in as well with Dragon Quest 11, Dragon Quest 3. It's a hell of a time. It's a hell of a game. Yeah. So this was Luis Aguasvivas talking to you. On behalf of the Fun and Games podcast. Happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.